I've had Aston Martins for 35 years, which included 3 Lagondas as well as many V8 and V12 Vantages. While the Lagonda is not known for its reliability, the 3 that I had owned were reasonably reliable. In 2006, I sold my airplane and decided to purchase my first new Aston Martin. It was a 2007 V8 Vantage with custom woodwork in the interior done by Aston Martin Works. Back then, you could purchase a 5-year unlimited mile warranty up front, which I did, assuming that the reliability of an Aston Martin would be questionable. My plan was to drive the car hard for 5 years, and then purchase a new one every 5 years. I was pleasantly shocked as to the reliability of these cars. At the recession in 2008, my business faltered, and I was forced to sell everything. I only had 2 years to enjoy the car, but put 25,000 miles on it, and it was just as fresh and reliable as the day I picked it up. Of all the things that I lost, it took me months to get over losing my Aston Martin. I've never had a car that I did not quickly get bored. The Vantage was a special occasion every time I drove it. In 2007, the 4.3-liter engine needed to be at the upper RPM range to keep it in the power band. The stock exhaust sounded great, and the driving experience was enjoyable, but far different than the American V8s I've owned. The clutch was extremely heavy, making it difficult to drive in stop-and-go traffic here in Minneapolis. As my business recovered a few years later, I purchased a 2009 used Vantage with 30,000 miles on it, with an extended 2-year warranty. I had not realized that the exhaust sound had become an option and not standard. Because of the warranty, I could not affordably change the exhaust, which was a major disappointment. It was my first sport shift car, which is not an automatic, and should not be considered an automatic because the transaxle is identical to the manual. By modulating the gas and shifting manually with the paddles, I found the Sport Shift a far superior option to the manual with its heavy clutch. Unfortunately, the sales staff at Aston Martin sold these cars as an automatic, and that was a huge mistake because people would just hit the D button and after a few months get tired of the jerking of the transmission. The second thing I did, which I continued to do with all my Vantages, is change the wheels and tires. The 19-inch wheel and tire combination does not fill up the wheel well, giving a narrower appearance to the car itself. By switching to 20-inch wheels with an offset, it provides a much better stance. I also changed the tires to Michelin Supersport Pilots, which are now standard on the 2025 Vantage. As the warranty was about to expire on my 2009, which would cost me $5,000 to extend, I decided to trade the car for an almost new 2015 Aston Martin V8 GT. This was a price leader that Aston Martin offered with a base price under $100,000, but was essentially a Vantage for $50,000 less. This was a phenomenal car, however. Price cutting meant a lower quality leather along with less soundproofing, which was actually a good thing because that exhaust note could be heard better from the interior. My previously 2 Vantages were ultra reliable. This one was not. It's a good thing I had a 2-year extended warranty, because it was constantly in the shop for oil leaks, switches that didn't work, along with the typical leaking taillights and several computer failures. The warranty work totaled over $20,000. As the warranty was close to expiring, I traded the V8 for a used 22,000-mile 2005 V12S from Aston Martin of Chicago. The trade price was only $20,000, including the 2-year timeless certified extended warranty, taxes, and shipping. I had assumed because Aston Martin ads claimed the timeless certification assured previous ownership history that this would have been a safe bet. It was not. When the car was delivered, the paint was flawless and the interior was flawless, but the windshield looked like the most pitted windshield I'd ever seen on any car. The piano black on the interior was not just cracked, it had a handprint permanently embossed in it. Many switches did not work, the headlights were 2 different colors, the taillights leaked, and that was just the beginning of the issues. Then I realized there was no data plate, nor were there any of the federally required stickers anywhere on the car. The plaque that showed who built the engine was missing, and long story short, I started demanding answers from Aston Martin Corporate, which is where the car originated in England. Interestingly, they seem to have lost all of the service records. They sent me a letter from the vice president stating that the car had not been driven harder than it would have a normal driving from any customer. I demanded the timeless certification. In that certification, it said to send the car to the paint shop for new paint, a new interior, and new ceramic brakes. I told the factory do not treat me as if I'm some stupid idiot, and they exchanged the car with an almost identical one-owner car with only 8,000 miles on it at their expense. That car was flawless in the 2 years that I owned that one. Other than the taillights, which they all leak, there were no issues. What is interesting is instead of sending the original V12S to the crusher, they decided to sell it locally for $99,000 with a 2-year extended warranty. Within 2 weeks of selling that car, the engine blew up. Aston Martin said it would take 6 months to get a new engine. I called the factory and said, if you don't replace that engine in 2 weeks, I am going to the press. 2 weeks later, a new engine was in their car. Over the next 2 years, that car was in the shop 11 months with all sorts of things replaced under warranty. Another settlement was made with a significant cash offer and 2 more years warranty. This car now has nearly 90,000 miles on it. It's been driven fairly hard, but still looks new and still drives as solid as the day it was built. Even though my replacement V12 has had no issues, black on black was my worst nightmare. Every drive meant cleaning it. I was able to trade the car on a new 2017 V12S Vantage, silver with a tan interior. Even though the tan interiors are more difficult to keep pristine, I think they fit the Aston Martin's elegance better. When COVID hit, I had assumed I'd better sell everything, only to find out my business actually did better during COVID. I stupidly traded down my new Vantage for a C8 Corvette. The Corvette is a phenomenal deal, and I paid retail without a premium for this reliable car that got great gas mileage. However, it did not have the visceral experience of the Aston Martin. This is why, in addition to the Corvette, I purchased a 2011 Volts 8 Vantage, and I upgraded it with modifications I thought more fitting of the car and updating it with more modern conveniences. I typically would change and increase the diameter of the wheels to 20-inch on the V8s. I did like the stock wheels on the V12 Vantages and used wheel spacers instead with no issues. The 2017 Vantage was the first that offered Apple CarPlay standard at the factory. Now that you know my history, and in particular with Vantages, this is my advice to anybody that's even remotely thinking of purchasing a 2006 through 2016, or in the case of a V12, 2017 Vantage. After 2009, most of the Vantages had the better sounding exhaust as an option. Some of the models, the sport exhaust was standard, for example, the 2015 GT and a Vantage. The sport shift driven as intended is something that many prefer over a manual. If you're going to drive a sport shift as an automatic, I would not purchase the car and only consider a manual. The earlier sport shifts have no indication that the clutch kiss procedure has been performed. This means you are not to touch the gear lever for at least 10 seconds after you start the car, just to be safe. The sport shift requires special software at inspections that only an Aston Martin dealer has. While this does not guarantee you will have no problems with the clutch, at least you can get the clutch measured and estimated life. On all Aston Martins of this era, the taillights will leak unless they are resealed, or other measures have been taken, such as delivering them to Davina Tech in England to get rebuilt with sequential lighting. I've never had a headlight leak, but I've heard it does happen. The oil leaks I had on my 2015 GT were pinch seals done at the factory. Again, for cost cutting on the GT, maybe the factory shortcut inspections. Many of the V8 Vantages will seep oil around the timing cover, and as long as it's not a leak, it should not be a factor in a purchase, but something to be aware of. If it doesn't seep, it probably eventually will. The prices of Vantages are incredibly low right now, and there is no need for continual Aston Martin services after the warranty expires. I can tell you I am in the market for another V12's Vantage, and I have yet to find one that has had recent Aston Martin services, which is a huge concern for me. At around 25,000 miles, the spark plugs need to be changed on a V12 Vantage. This means taking apart many of the components of the engine to get to the spark plugs. So, although not required, it's accessible for the coil packs to be changed along with the spark plugs. A friend of mine bought a 2014 Vanquish with 25,000 miles on it, and the coil packs failed, putting the car in limp mode the first week of ownership. I followed him back to the Aston Martin dealer at its top speed of 25 miles an hour. If this was not done, count on spending another $3,000 to get it done. This same car looking at the Carfax had leaking motor mounts, which is nearly a $5,000 repair that the previous owner decided not to do. Leaking motor mounts is an indication of a very hard-driven car. The car is currently on the market for $82,000. Considering the $8,000 in deferred services above the actual cost is likely over $90,000. Let's talk about clutch life. You will find Aston Martins that have 8,000 miles on its first clutch before failure and 80,000 miles before failure. My 2017 brand new V12S Vantage had a bad clutch at just 50 miles, which they replaced before delivering the car. In my opinion, for whatever reason, the quality control on the taillights, which the LED panels were made in Lakeville, Minnesota, but assembled in Canada, as well as the clutch, should have been better. The likelihood of a used Aston Martin Vantage being hard driven and abused is probably pretty likely. The likelihood of a Vantage with the sport shift, having its multiple previous owners properly trained on how to use it, is unlikely. The likelihood of a manual being driven even harder, well, you can make that decision yourself. This is why Aston Martin ownership means paying the Aston Martin tax, which is at a minimum an Aston Martin inspection and service every 2 years. Count on for sure a complete pre-purchase inspection. This inspection should be at an Aston Martin dealer if the car has a sport shift, because that is the only way you are going to know the life of that clutch. My current 2011 V12S Vantage I currently have for sale to purchase another V12S. For the past 3 years, I've had all the services done at Aston Martin of Minneapolis annually. While this doesn't guarantee previous ownership did not shortcut services, it pretty much does guarantee it's not going to be the next owner's problem. I also demand the annual services be stamped and signed in the owner's manual. Many Aston Martin dealers forget this important step. I have 2 glass keys, one I paid dearly for. I will sell the car with 1 key because it's likely my V12S will have only 1. If the V12S has 2 glass keys, I'll send the spare to the next owner at no charge. It seems previous owners like to keep the glass key. The DB9 and the V8 Vantage keys are not interchangeable, and if you do not have a used key with the original codes, they are not reprogrammable. All Aston Martin of this era have worthless tiny visors with clown mirrors. Just look at the mirror, and most distort the face. My previous Vantages, all of them, I had the mirrors replaced under warranty to please my wife. Shrinking leather is common, but I've not had the problem on my cars. The fuel door refusing to open is a very easy adjustment and very common. The 2015 V8 GT was a wonderful car, but my experience was my only bad one in V8 ownership. The first V12S was a factory-tracked and abused car, which is why it's been a nightmare for its current owner. But he went in knowing its history because I made him quite aware of it before he purchased. Look at the Carfax. If the first 3 years to assure warranty, the services will likely be at an Aston Martin dealer. Continued Aston Martin services are very rare in this era car. If you are looking at a V12S, make sure the carbon brakes are in good shape. All it takes is to spray tire cleaner on those discs to destroy them, a $20,000 mistake. These are unique, beautiful, and visceral cars to drive. I chose to purchase my current V8 Vantage after driving a Ferrari Roma. I felt these new cars are missing something and somewhat boring. The Roma, while beautiful and powerful, did not have the elegance of the Vantage interiors, which I think is far better. The V8 Vantage is a great car to drive, but I miss having a V12S. I may keep my V8 if I can't get my price, and that's okay too. The V12S feels a bit heavier and the power band is electric motor smooth. The V8 you know by sound and feel exactly where you are in the power band, with the V12S a bit less. I did not mention the earlier V12 Vantages. If you love having the tires easily break loose on every shift, that's the car for you. If you want to have something more drivable, go with the far more refined V12S. I hope this advice helps. These are very special cars and highly unlikely they will ever be replicated.